Hi there, this is Svava Brooks. I am so happy you are joining us for Take Your Power Back interview series. See, I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. I've been on the healing journey for over 20 years now, and I love to help other survivors learn how they can live, love, and succeed in life after abuse and trauma. And I do remember how hard it was to find the tools and the resources to help us overcome the impact of the abuse. And that's why I started interviewing these wonderful experts, authors, survivor thrivers that are willing to share their insightful tips, research, methods, and experience from helping people. And this information will help you too. So I want to welcome today a special guest, Dr. Margaret Paul. Thank you and welcome and thank you for being here with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Svava. Looking forward to it.
Great, thank you. I want to tell our audience just a little bit about you before we jump into our questions. But Dr. Margaret Paul, aside from having impacted my life very, very deeply, and that's why I wanted her to be here, because I know she can make a big difference for all you guys. Dr. Margaret Paul is a best-selling author, a popular Huffington Post writer, and a co-creator of the powerful Inner Bonding, the self-healing process, and the related self-quest, self-healing software program. I can't wait to hear more about that. Recommended by the actress Lindsay Wagner and singer Alanis Morissette. Apologize if I mess up people's names, but Dr. Paul has appeared on numerous radio and television shows, including Oprah. Her book titles include Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by You? And subsequent titles, Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by God? That's a big loaded question, right? And also you have the third one, Do I Have to Give Up Me to Be Loved by My Kids? Healing Your Aloneness and Inner Bonding is also the books that you've written, and Margaret holds a PhD in psychology, is a relationship expert, public speaker, consultant, and an artist. Has successfully worked with thousands and taught classes and seminars for over 46 years. And I mean, just your website alone, Dr. Paul, is just this wealth of resources. And I've visited your community. I've signed up for a few of your online courses. And every single time I go through and visit your programs, I learn and discover something new about myself. And I get reaffirmed in using the inner bonding process. So I really am excited and grateful that you're here with us.
Thank you. That's great.
So, of course, I want to start with all this experience. You must have a profound, of course, deep passion for helping people and want to help people feel better about themselves. But where did you get started? How did you get to this place of doing what you're doing?
I was one of those kids that always knew what I wanted to do. I knew by the time I was 5 that I wanted to be helping people. I was not a happy kid, and when I was 5, my mother took me to a psychiatrist, and after interviewing me and my mother, he was standing there with both of us, and he says to me, "Now, you tell your mother not to yell at you." My mother was a kind of borderline rageaholic type person, and I remember thinking, I am 5 years old, and she is not going to listen to me. Why don't you tell her? And my next thought was, I could do a better job than you. And so from then on, that was it. I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Wow.
And so that's what led me there.
Wow. So how has the inner bonding changed your life? I mean, I'm sure you had some self-exploration that led you to figuring out what worked for others, since it maybe worked for you, correct?
Yeah, and you see, what happened is that I went into becoming a traditional psychotherapist for 17 years.
Okay.
And I was just not at all happy with the results of that. And I didn't like that people, they had to keep coming back all the time, and they didn't have a process they could rely on. So I started to ask for a teacher to come into my life. I thought there must be something that would really help people on a very deep level. And that's when I met my best friend and co-creator, Dr. Erica Chopich. She had half the process of inner bonding, and I had half the process of inner bonding. So we met over 30 years ago, And of course we had to meet, and so we put together the process, and it's been evolving for the last over 30 years now, and it's completely changed my life, because I had so much therapy before that. I was going from therapist to therapist trying to figure out how to be happy, and not a single therapist ever said to me, do you know that you're responsible for your own feelings? Do you know that the real healing is in learning to love yourself and connect with a spiritual source of love? Well, nobody ever said that to me. I had no idea. And even if they had, I would have had no idea how to do it.
That's right.
Yeah. And so that's what happened with inner bonding. Inner bonding is a really powerful 6-step process. It's a roadmap. As people learn it and practice it, it's a roadmap for learning to connect with your own feelings and take responsibility for them, for lovingly managing them, for learning from them, for connecting with a higher source of love and wisdom, so that we can take care of ourselves. And it really does teach us how to love ourselves. And it completely rewires the brain. It's completely rewired my brain. I am so different than I was, even after all those years of therapy. That didn't do anything to rewire my brain. I was still doing the same stuff after that. But since I've been practicing inner bonding, I can see, it's a process. I think it's a lifetime process. But I'm completely different, and my life is completely different than before inner bonding.
Yeah, I can relate, just because I came across your work probably 10 years ago, and I read your books, and I really connected with the stories in the book, because it was hard for me to understand the process when you don't have a model, someone that kind of shows you how to do it. And I'm a visual, tactile learner, but having the stories of other people, I'm like, oh, I can relate to that person. And so 10 years ago, when I was going through some of this, I know that your process helped me create a safety for having the big feelings.
Right.
Like that's like the first layer, so to speak. And I want to say, I've been in therapy for 10 years since, before that, but it was like, oh, okay, this is what they mean. You know what I mean? So it was actually some tangible that I could hang on to and take myself through. And so that's what it did for me at the time. And I've kind of been dabbling in it ever since. But, then I've just revisited working with you, and I felt like it went even deeper this time. So it was a beautiful kind of, I can see how it, as the more you practice, the more profound it works.
Well, that's right. Like anything worth learning, it does take practice.
Yes.
But what we're after in inner bonding is developing what we call the loving adult self. Mm-hmm. And the loving adult self is who we are when we're connected with a higher source of guidance, and we're bringing that love inside, and we're open to learning. And one of the basic tenets of inner bonding is that there's only 2 intentions to choose from in any given moment. And one is the intention to protect against our pain with some form of controlling behavior, which we all had to learn to do, as you know, when we were growing up, because the pain was too big.
Yes.
And the other intention is to learn about loving ourselves and ultimately sharing our love with others. And so when our intention is to learn about loving ourselves and we're connected with our higher source, then we're in a loving adult state. And that's what we're after. And the more we practice that, the more that gets programmed into our brain. And the easier it becomes to turn to that intention to learn and become that loving adult when really, really painful and scary things are happening. And I've noticed with me, where I used to be so reactive to things, somebody would get upset with me or angry with me, and damn, I would just be, defending myself or explaining or giving myself up or getting angry, something reactive. I don't do that now. Now I can sit with it. I can go in. I can see how it feels. I can bring compassion into myself. I can connect with my higher source. All very fast now.
Yes.
That gives me the strength and the wisdom to respond in a way that, first of all, doesn't exacerbate the problem, second of all, is loving to me and is loving to the other person and gives us a chance to, either move forward or not get entangled and embroiled into something that isn't going to be good for either of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes practice. I mean, I can't tell you that I did it as soon as inner bonding came into our lives. It's taken a lot of practice.
Yes. Yeah. And there's, one thing, understanding it here and then really connecting it here. And I just, if you could speak more about the resistance, because, we're talking about abuse survivors and, we're protecting ourselves and our brain is hardwired to do so. And we are encouraging people to step into some kind of level of trust that this is going to help them, even though they may not have experience of it. I mean, how do you speak to someone about that?
Well, first of all, we do need to realize that all the ways that we protected, whether it was our various addictions or judging ourselves or getting angry or giving ourselves up, going in our heads, we needed those to survive, especially if there was a lot of abuse. There's no way that we can manage the huge, huge feelings of the heartbreak, the helplessness over others, over what's happening to us, and the depth of the loneliness of not being seen and loved. There's no way that we can manage all that as a child alone. And the people who were supposed to protect us were often the ones who were abusing us. So
that's right.
It's horrific what so many children go through. And so, of course, we had to protect, and we have to be very compassionate towards the part of us that learned to avoid our feelings. Now, however, what most people realize as adults is that all the ways we learn to avoid our feelings are now causing us pain.
Yes.
When we turn to addictions, it does not heal the pain. It just numbs it for a moment. When we judge ourselves, we feel terrible.
Yeah.
We stay in our head. We're completely disconnected. We make somebody else responsible. We end up feeling like a victim. None of it is working well.
Yes.
And when we realize that, then we say, you know what, there must be a better way.
Yes.
And that's when we become willing to move towards our feelings rather than away from them. And this is very magical, actually. When we move towards our feelings and we learn to embrace them with compassion, which is step one of inner bonding.
Yes.
We find that just the act of getting present with ourselves, with our feelings, not judging them, not avoiding them, starts to calm us down. Just that very first step. It's like if you had a child who was crying and upset, and you just walked away, the child's going to get more upset. If you sit down and you put your arms around the child and you say, honey, I'm right here, and you're not alone, I'm with you, then the child starts to feel a little safer and calm down. Well, that's what we're doing for our feelings, which we can call an inner child, that we're sitting with ourselves, with our feelings, with kindness, with gentleness, with caring and compassion. Well, as you do that, you start to realize, maybe I can start to manage these feelings. In fact, turning away from them is making them worse, and turning towards them and being there starts to make them feel a little bit better. Then we start to realize that the feelings actually have a lot of information for us, that they're there to teach us a lot of things.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we become curious.
Yes, and it's interesting, and it's sad in a way that we don't learn more, even as children or in our culture, to get educated about our emotions, that's part of being human and resisting them. We live in a culture that, you can't show pain, you can't show tears, you can't even be too happy either. Then you're just too much, right? But so I really love what you say about, the model of being loving towards this resistance that's protected you. That really helped me, because I had been fighting it, like pushing so hard, like, no, I can't. Instead of like, well, you were trying to protect me, thank you for keeping me safe. It was like honoring that process and the part of me who legitimately had kept me safe.
That's right.
So I was really validating important part of me instead of rejecting it again, like another thing that I was trying to avoid or reject about myself.
Yeah, and the part of us that did keep us safe, we call the wounded self, or the ego wounded self. And this is a programmed part of us, programmed with a lot of fear and a lot of false beliefs. Now, it's also the part of us that judges itself. And so, because the loving adult is not a judgmental aspect, the loving adult does not judge. The loving adult does not ever say, oh, shame on you for your feelings, or what's the matter with you, or get over it, get a grip. That's always what the wounded self does. And so the wounded self tends to reject itself, to judge itself.
Wow.
And push itself and say, well, how, what's the matter with you? How could you feel this way? And you should get over it by now and get past it. And you've had enough therapy, and you ought to be done by this by now. So that's never a loving adult that goes into self-judgment.
Wow, that's interesting. So it kind of feeds on itself.
It does.
Right? Wow.
And yet when we move into our heart and we learn to connect, which is not that hard. People think, oh, it's going to be so hard to connect with a higher self or higher source. It's not hard at all. And I teach people all the time to do that. And when you open and you connect and you realize, you know what, I'm not alone, that I'm being guided here.
Yes.
And there's a strength, there's a wisdom, there's love that I can bring inside of me. And I can embrace that wounded part of me. I can say to that wounded part of me, like you said, honey, you did a really great job of keeping us alive and keeping us sane.
Yes.
But I know that you're exhausted. You've been working so hard. And you get to rest now because I'm learning to take care of us. And I don't have to do it alone. I have spiritual help. And I'm going to learn to take responsibility for our feelings, to lovingly embrace and learn from our feelings. You don't have to be on guard avoiding them anymore.
That's beautiful. I just felt calm as you spoke about that. It's like, yes, what a sense of relief. Like this part of us who's been trying so hard, even though they feel like they have to, they are tired of it too.
Exhausted.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And people get sick, they get sick because they're so worn out, trying to keep everything together, trying to stay safe.
Yes.
Doing it on their own without the spiritual energy. I could not function at this point in my life without tapping into that energy source.
Yes. I understand. Well, I know you want to take us through what the steps are, but I just wanted to touch upon the self-abandonment. And I mean, you've talked about that a little bit and how that affects our recovery and trauma.
Yeah. And as I said, well, there's basically 4 ways that we abandon ourselves, which we had to learn.
Yes.
And one of them is we learn to disconnect from our body. Our feelings are in the body, and we couldn't manage them. So we went up in our head.
Yes.
And so we cut off, we dissociate, we disconnect from our body so that we don't have to feel anything. But that is an abandonment. If you imagine that this inner child is inside and you're up here, you're all cut off, you're abandoning that inner child.
Yes.
And then we learn to judge ourselves very harshly. What's the matter with you? You're not good enough. You're stupid. You're ugly. You're too fat. You're too skinny. You'll never be good enough. You're flawed. You're intrinsically bad. You're wrong. You'll never make it. You're a failure. You'll end up on the streets. I mean, on and on and on. We do this to ourselves.
Yes.
Well, obviously, if we said those things to an actual child, that would be very unloving.
Yes.
That child would feel very rejected and abandoned. Well, that's what we do to ourselves when we're judging ourselves. And then third, we turn to many addictions. We turn to substance abuse and process addictions to avoid the pain. And again, that's like if a child comes to you crying and you say, oh, I need a drink. Or, don't bother me, I'm busy working on the computer. The child is going to feel abandoned. And this is what we do. We abandon ourselves with our various addictions, whether it's food or alcohol or drugs or sex or nicotine or work or shopping and spending and on and on. We've just got a million of them to avoid feeling our feelings. And then finally, another addiction is that we become love addicted. We hand our inner child over to the other person here. It's not my job to love myself. It's your job, and you better do it right. And that puts us in a very helpless victim state.
Yeah.
Where then we have to try and control that person to get them to give us the love that we're starving for on the inner level.
I can relate to that. I think I did that to my husband for a long time until I realized one day, like, because he was the problem. He wasn't doing it right. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It's like what's going on is in here. It's not out here. How can I expect him to fix it?
Right. And he doesn't want the job anyway. He's got to take care of his own little boy.
Exactly. And I can tell you, there was a big shift in our marriage when I was like, wait a minute, it's not his job. I'm going to just start focusing on taking care of me and being there for myself. And let me tell you, all of a sudden I was married to a different man.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes. So he'd been there all along. I just hadn't seen him because I was so busy handing my little girl over to him. You love her. I don't want her. I don't know what to do with her. So it was amazing how that worked.
Not only that, but the moment we do that, then we feel rejected inside.
Yes.
And the message to ourselves is, you're not worth loving. And the only way that you have any worth at all is if somebody else loves you. And so right away, we're rejecting and abandoning ourselves.
Yeah.
And then no matter what the other person does, it won't do it because we've already rejected and abandoned ourselves.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like, if you have an actual child and you say, I don't want this child, I'm going to give the child to you. And even if you're really loving to the child, the fact that I've rejected my child,
yes,
that's devastating.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
I think it's a really big one. And I can see, the people that I work with, it's definitely, and just to kind of really connect with it, how we reject ourselves. That's like, there takes some shifting in our thinking to really get that. So.
And then you see, we've rejected ourselves, and the consequence of that is that we then feel anxious and depressed and angry or guilty or ashamed. We feel, these really difficult feelings.
Yes.
Because we're rejecting ourselves, like any child would feel that if they were rejected by a parent. Well, then we don't want to feel those feelings. So then we'll turn to even more addictions or medication or something else to shove down the anxiety and the depression. And yet these feelings are giving us information. They're saying, you're abandoning me.
Yes.
You're not loving me. Yes. The wounded self is in charge, abandoning me rather than loving me. So of course I feel anxious or depressed or angry. How do you expect me to feel?
It's a vicious cycle, huh?
Yeah, and then, see, in the inner bonding process, we differentiate between two kinds of feelings. There's the wounded feelings, like I was just saying. These are the feelings that we cause by our own self-abandonment. And then there's the core pain of life. And that's what I was saying before. That's the loneliness, the heartbreak, the helplessness over others, the grief. These are huge, huge feelings, especially for a child, that most people have never learned to manage. And these feelings also have important information for us, which we can't act when we're avoiding them with our various addictions. And part of inner bonding is learning to lovingly manage the core painful feelings of life so that we no longer abandon ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that was like the aha moment, or the really big thing that I got from my last workshop with you, was that I really felt like I reconnected with my inner guides, or my source, in a way that I know there's some deep core wounds in there that I'm working on, but I know they're big, but now that I'm connected to that part, it's not going to take me down. It's not that big because I know I have this huge loving energy that's here with me, and they're not going to let it take me over. So overpower, so.
Yeah, that's right. Well, sometimes I mean, you've done a lot of work, but certainly there's a lot of people who haven't and who have had a lot of abuse. And I don't ever recommend they do it by themselves. They need some support.
Yes.
Because sometimes those feelings are just too big
Yes.
to manage on your own. And if you're loving yourself, you're going to reach out for help in going into those deep feelings.
Yeah, and that's a sign of, self-responsibility when you recognize you need another person to hold the space for you or to connect with until you practice this enough until you feel like you can do it on your own. Absolutely. Yeah, because it feels like the rug is kind of pulled from underneath you.
Right.
When you first start going in there. It's just like you said, I was living on my head. It wasn't safe down here. There was just too many big feelings. So yeah, it took months, years to really allow that deeper connection to happen. So yeah. Well, beautiful. I mean, so did we touch upon the steps?
No, we haven't
Okay.
actually. So
All right.
Let me go through the steps. So
Okay.
as I said, the first step is getting present inside with your feelings with compassion.
Yes.
So I've already talked about step 1, which is getting present inside with your feelings, wanting responsibility for them. And then in step 2, we put our focus in our heart and we open and invite the presence of love and compassion inside. It's just a simple invitation. Please come into my heart. Mm-hmm. And we consciously move into the intention to learn. That's step 2. That creates the loving adult self. And then in step 3, we're doing a dialogue process where we're dialoguing with the feelings. We're asking questions like, what am I telling you or how am I treating you that's causing you to feel anxious or depressed or whatever, or what's happening with another person that may be causing you to feel badly, feel hurt or upset. Mm-hmm. And we understand what's happening. And if we're the ones causing, then we dialogue with the wounded part of ourselves. Like, well, if I'm telling the reason, if the reason I'm feeling anxious is because I'm putting all this pressure on myself to do everything right and be perfect, then I would go to the wounded self and say, why do you believe that? Where did you get the belief that, you have to do everything right and be perfect, and what do you think is going to happen? Mm-hmm. And the wounded self might think, well, that's the only way I can get approval, and, unless I get approval, I'm not okay. And so we're doing a whole exploration of the belief system, false beliefs. And once we get a clear picture, then in step 4, we open to our higher guidance. And again, it has to do with just opening to learning. When we open to learning, the portal opens. We open to learning about loving ourselves. The portal opens to spirit. And we're asking 2 questions. What's the truth about any of the beliefs that I uncovered in step 3? And what is the loving action towards myself? And we ask the questions and we just open. We allow the information to pop into our mind. Spirit speaks to us in many ways, through our feelings, through thoughts that pop into our mind, through images. It might not come right away. Maybe it's going to come in a dream or when we're talking to somebody, but eventually Spirit will give us the answers that we need. Mm-hmm. And then in step 5, we take the loving action, whatever it is we've been guided to do. And then in step 6, we check in, how am I feeling now as a result of the action I've taken? And if I'm feeling lighter, if I'm feeling some relief, then I know that I've indeed taken a loving action.
Wow. It's quite profound, and you make it sound very simple.
I mean, that's very brief, as you know.
Yes.
It goes into great depth.
Yes.
That's just the outline of
it. Yes. And what's the overall experience that you have had using this process? I mean, do you feel like it just introduces people to some possibility of change, or have you seen dramatic shifts immediately?
I've seen huge dramatic shifts in people, life-changing shifts, as people really get that their unhappiness is coming from their self-abandonment. Mm-hmm. And they realize that they can learn to love themselves, that there is a process for learning to do that.
Yes.
Life changes for them quite dramatically and quite quickly for many, many people. I mean, I've had people let me know that, like this one woman who did the Self-Quest program, which does teach the inner bonding process, that she was on heavy drugs for 35 years. She went to every recovery center. She tried every therapy. And she let me know that through self-quest, she finally understood why she was so addicted and that she was clean. And she's been clean now for a number of years.
Wow.
And she did it all on her own through the self-quest program.
Wow.
I've had another woman through self-quest tell me that she's lost 110 pounds. She went back to school. She got her degree. She's working. Her marriage is better. Her kids are better. I mean, just all kinds of things.
Wow.
So when people really get what's going on and they see how to go about doing it differently, change happens dramatically.
And that's the beauty of it. It's like, and I think, and I don't know if it's our culture that keeps enforcing and reinforcing like the damage that's been done, and you can't change, and poor you, the victimhood.
Right.
Because I feel like, yes, there's been struggles where I was stuck with the same issue for a long time, but once you get it, it's just like, right. It shifts.
Yeah, and the same thing with people in relationships. I work with a lot of people in relationships, and many of them are on the verge of divorce or separation or whatever, and they've been doing the same thing for years, and they don't think there's any way out.
Yes.
And as I teach them inner bonding, and they each start to take responsibility for their own feelings, like you said,
yes,
everything changes between them. I heard like one couple, I've only had a few sessions with them, and they said, we've had the best week we've ever had. Because they're taking care of themselves.
Yes, that's beautiful.
And people people have this erroneous belief that if they focus on loving themselves, that somehow they're going to be selfish and they're going to be distant, and how are they going to get together? And yet it's not true. The opposite happens. The more they take care of themselves, the more love they have inside of them. They learn to bring that love in and fill themselves and make themselves happy. And when we're happy and filled inside, we want to share that love. We're social beings. We don't just want to be isolated. We want to share that love. And so that's what happens, is that from their joy and their peace, their happiness, they come together to share. Yes. Rather than coming empty and upset and needy and angry. Yes. They come to share their love.
Wow. It makes a lot of sense. I can relate to that, like I shared earlier, in terms of once I started identifying, my part in being happy wasn't anybody else's job, then this actually works. It was hard because I was waiting for someone else to fix me, because that wasn't ever going to happen. So, yeah. Right. So that's been the struggle, and I think that's the struggle, I think, for a lot of people. It's like, right. And maybe the resistance, like, what do you mean? It's like.
Well, and the resistance for a lot of people is that, nobody took care of me as I was growing up.
That's right.
Nobody gave me the love that I needed as I was growing up. I had to do it for myself. Are you telling me that now I have to do it for myself? That's not fair. And so there's this resistance.
Yes.
And yet, the truth is there isn't anybody on the planet, other than when you're a baby and maybe your parents really want to love you, but other than that, there isn't anybody on the planet that wants the job of taking responsibility for anybody else's feelings. And so if we're going to feel loved, we're the ones who are going to need to do that.
Yes, like nobody's coming, honey, right?
Nobody's coming.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that responsibility.
Yeah.
And if somebody comes into your life who seems to want it, you can bet that they've got an agenda.
That's right.
They're going to take care of you if you then give yourself up and take care of them.
Yep.
And that's not a good deal.
Nope. It doesn't end well usually. So, wow. Well, like I said, I am so grateful that you're here sharing about this. We talked about doing a little mini session, and I'm definitely up for it. But you also, you've already talked about your personal source and spiritual guidance, and I don't know if you feel appropriate just to touch upon that, because I think that was probably because it's intangible, you know what I mean? It's like, what do you mean?
Right.
You're telling me there's God here or spirit, and I can talk to it and communicate with it. But,
right.
So now I understand because I have that experience. But before I was just like, what do you mean?
Well, one of the ways that I encourage people to think about it is that, if you think of your soul as being just huge, the energy of the soul, and they've been able to take pictures with Kirlian photography, and they see that the soul goes way, way out, it's big. And so a part of the soul is in the body, and that's That's what we're calling the inner child.
Mm-hmm.
That's the feeling self. And the rest of the soul is all around here, and it's energy, it's wisdom. So I encourage people to imagine, if they don't have a concept of God or spirit or a guardian angel or, a teacher or whatever, to imagine an older, wiser part of themselves, that their higher self, their spirit, is ancient and has a tremendous amount of wisdom. And it exists at a higher frequency than we do. Our bodies vibrate at a low frequency so we can see each other. If we vibrated like a hummingbird's wings, really, really fast, we couldn't see each other. So spirit vibrates at a much higher frequency, and in order to access it, we have to raise our frequency, which happens naturally when we move into an intention to learn about loving ourselves. And so that's a very high frequency. So when you say, oh, I really want to learn what's loving to me, that's why I said that opens the portal. And then when you ask a question, spirit is here. It's right here. It's always here. Like the air is here, like the gravity is here. It's just a law. It's a law of love.
Yeah.
And it's here. It can't go anywhere. It's what we live in. And so when we ask, we're going to start to receive answers. And as you practice this, even if you don't believe anything, just ask the air and you'll start to receive answers.
Yeah.
After a while, you're going to recognize that you're not alone.
Yes.
That you are, something's there answering you. Something's there guiding you and helping you.
Yes. And I think for me, it was because I think it was the value in me. Like, I didn't think I was worth helping. So I even resisted asking and then really receiving it.
Right.
And then now that I'm more and more quieting down and making space for it, it's like it's there. And I'm like testing it. Is this for real? It's like so.
Well, I've had so many just absolutely amazing experiences of being guided that after a while you have to say, yeah, right, I'm not alone.
Yes. Well, you mentioned even one of your books you feel like was just almost channeled, right? Correctly?
Oh yeah, all my writing is now.
Yes.
I just sit down and I'll have a title and I'll sit down and I'll say to my higher guidance, okay, you're on.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of disappear and let
it come through.
Let it come through.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, I'm so glad again that you're here and we're having this conversation. My heart sings just thinking about all the people that are going to benefit from your sharing here today. But I'm up for trying a mini session if you want to.
Okay, let's go. Let's do it.
Okay, just to see what comes up. I brought my little girl with me today. This is Svava.
Okay, so take a couple of deep breaths. And use your breath. Put your mind on your breath to take you inside. Mindfulness breathing. Watch your breath, follow your breath. Be conscious of your breath as you go inside. And as you breathe in, scan your body for any physical sensations, any emotions. Doesn't have to be major, just can be just a little tiny thing, or it can be a great big thing, but just notice what's happening inside of you. And what are you noticing?
I'm feeling like it's hard for me to breathe all the way down.
So it feels like that. Where does it feel like there's a block?
It feels a little restricted here, but I'm feeling like I want to pull it down, but it's like restricted.
Okay, so there's a tightness somewhere. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want you to just get present with that tightness. No judgment. Know that the tightness is there for some good reason. That it's protecting from something. And just be very present and compassionate. Tightness. Not trying to push through it or make it go away. Just being fully present with it. And find a place in you that wants responsibility for it. you find that place in you?
Yes.
Okay, now put your focus in your heart. Breathe into your heart. And imagine your higher guidance, whatever that is for you. And invite the presence of love and compassion and wisdom into your heart by simply saying, I invite you in. It's just an invitation. And consciously move into an intention to learn about yourself. And now take that bear that you've got, your little girl, and look at her and ask her, what am I telling you? How am I treating you that's causing you to feel tight right now?
So again, she's telling me, right? Or I'm asking her. Yes, got it.
No, you're asking.
Okay.
You're asking her, what am I telling you? How am I treating you?
I think
Ask her out loud.
I think she's uncomfortable with this process right now, like being exposed.
Okay, so ask her, what am I telling you right now?
So
That's making you feel uncomfortable.
What am I telling you right now that's making you feel uncomfortable?
Okay, now turn her around, facing out. Pull her into the tightness. Go down inside and let that tight part of you speak about the discomfort of being exposed right now. What is an adult part of you saying to you inside that's a little scary to you and is making you feel tight?
It's like I'm blocking. There's clearly something here that I'm.
Okay, so I'm wondering let me be your little girl for a moment,
Okay.
And I'll try some things on and see if it fits for you.
Yep.
Well, you're telling me that people are going to judge me, or you're telling me that I'm not going to do it right.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So now let it be that little girl saying that to your adult. Saying it, no, turn around. Okay, and be the little girl saying whatever it is that they felt the same.
I can't do this right. You're making me do things or expecting things of me that I can't do. It's hard. People are not going to like it. They're going to judge us or judge me.
Okay, so turn her back around. And when you think about the part of you that's telling your little girl that, how old do you think you were when you got scared like that of being judged and not doing it right?
I'm actually feeling like an early teen.
Okay.
Right now.
So then we would say that right now there's a teenage wounded part of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's putting pressure on the little girl and telling her she better do it right or people are going to judge her, and that's scaring her. It's making her feel tight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I want you to imagine now that your bear is the adolescent.
Okay.
And then ask her that there must be a good reason that she's so worried.
Mm-hmm. There must be a good reason.
Why is she so worried?
Why are you so concerned?
Turn her back around now. Yeah. Okay, now go down to the place that says we're not going to do it right, we're going to be judged. What does that part of you want to tell you?
Well, that part it's not safe.
It's not safe because why? What happened?
That when we didn't right, when we weren't perfect, we got hurt.
Yeah, okay. Now, obviously, if we were doing a whole session,
Yes.
to go very deeply into that hurt.
Yes.
Yes. But we're not going to do that right
Nope.
here. But just enough to know
Yeah.
that the wounded self got, that you got hurt
Yes.
when you didn't do things right.
Yes.
So the wounded self is your protector. She's saying, don't put yourself out there. You're going to get hurt. Okay. Turn her back around. And now, open to learning with your higher guidance. And ask, is it true now that the same thing is going to happen? If I'm doing this session and I'm being vulnerable, am I going to get hurt?
No.
So it's not the same as it was
No.
when you were growing up.
And it
Is it okay?
almost feels silly saying it or thinking it or just like that.
Right. So is it okay now to make mistakes or get blocked or not know what to do or, fumble around? Is it okay to not be perfect or do things right?
It is okay because that's how we learn.
Right, that's how we learn. Okay, and that is the truth. And so ask your higher guidance, other than telling your little girl the truth, which you just did, and I'm sure brought her some relief.
Yes.
Is there any other loving action that you need to take for yourself right now? Is there anything else your little girl needs right now from you?
I think she would like a reassurance. So can I reassure her?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I know we're doing a lot of things right now that we haven't done before. And for a long time, you took charge. But I'm going to do it now. I'm the adult now. You can just go hang out and play with our animals. I'm the one learning how to be adult in an adult world.
Okay, so how does that make her feel?
Lighter, and the energy went away.
Okay, so the tightness went away.
Yes.
So you can breathe now.
Yes.
Okay, why don't you give your little girl a hug?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So obviously that's a very brief interval process, but that was great because you got in touch with what the tightness was and where it comes from, and no judgment, just understanding, and then reassured your little girl, told her the truth, reassured her, and the tightness went away. And that's what happens with inner bonding. Okay, that was great, honey. That was terrific.
Thank you. That was really good. And like I said, I didn't even have to go that deep into the feeling, just acknowledging it. But I could feel like if I would have gone deeper into it, I probably would have had some tears with it. But just acknowledging it and validating it, taking loving action. I mean, they got brighter in here.
Yeah.
That's the shift. And I feel like I'm smiling more and my whole body is more relaxed.
Good for you.
So thank you. That was beautiful.
You're welcome.
So any last minute tips for our audience and how they can find you? I know you have a special gift for our audience to come to your website, and if I can encourage them to join your community and sign up for your workshops, you have a special gift here. Dear God, how can I heal so that I may love? Can you tell us a little bit about this ebook?
Yeah, that is again it's a channeled ebook. Does teach people a lot about the inner bonding process. So, if they click on your link, they can download that ebook.
Beautiful, beautiful. And the overreaching message then that I appreciate about you is that I've been in your workshop and I've seen you work with all kinds of people dealing with all kinds of issues. Is really that there is no abuse or trauma too great to really learn to love ourselves.
No, that's absolutely right. That I have worked with people with the most unbelievable trauma who heal, who become whole, who become happy, healthy, loving human beings. Yes. And so there is no trauma. Spirit is very powerful, and when we learn to tap into that love, We learn to take responsibility for loving ourselves. It's amazing what happens.
Yes. And that's what this ebook is about. It takes you through the steps, and it brings clarity to the process of healing your fears of intimacy, of rejection, of engulfment, that you stand in the way of fully loving, and you will learn what it means to love yourself so you can share your love with others. That's beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much again with all my heart, Dr. Paul, for all that you do and for your generosity with your time here today. And I do encourage all our audiences to come and visit you and sign up for your workshops and your communities, because it's been a life-changing experience.
Yes, if they'll just come to innerbonding.com, there's a whole lot of free stuff. And as you said, the courses, there's a whole lot available
Yes.
to help people learn to love themselves.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much again, and best wishes and for all that you do.
Thank you. Same to you. You take care.